Okay, picture this. It's 1849, the California gold rush is in full swing, and folks are flocking to the rivers with their shiny new pans and shovels, dreaming of striking it rich. They're not out there to fight, they just want to sift through the dirt in peace and maybe snag a fortune. But then some big shot landowner rolls in and says, "Oh, you want that gold? You have to fight for it." And suddenly it's less about panning and more about dodging fists over the best spots. Of course, historically, people were probably killed over stakes where gold was found, but murder is illegal, and in Ashes, if a player wanted to kill another for their stake of land, then the aggressor should have to become corrupted if they do so. I'm kinda getting off topic, but that's kind of where I'm at with Stephen Sharif's latest news on gathering in Ashes of Creation. On one hand, dynamic spawns and a real focus on gathering as a core system is very exciting. They're finally giving artisanship the love it deserves. But then they throw in contesting resources and friction in sought-after areas. And now my chill mining session feels like it's about to turn into a Wild West bar brawl without the luxury of free drinks afterwards. I understand that Ashes is a PvX game and alphas are for testing, but if they think forcing PvP into a traditionally relaxing activity is gonna fly with casual players, they might be panning for trouble. So stick around while we talk about how Steven wants to turn peaceful gathering in Ashes of Creation into an unbalanced cage match and how it could alienate the casual audience in Ashes of Creation. Before I start sounding like I'm just here to poop on your parade, let's give credit where credit is due, because Intrepid's actually got some gold nuggets in this update. First off, the move to dynamic spawns is the kind of thing I've been itching for since I first realized how static spawns worked in Alpha 2. No more camping the same boring spot waiting for that legendary braidwood to pop up like I'm stuck in some kind of MMO Groundhog Day. Now, resources spawn in clusters, shift around, and actually make you explore the world like a proper adventurer, not a bot on a timer. It's immersive, it's fresh, and it feels like they're finally giving Gathering the respect it deserves as a core system, not just some tacked-on afterthought to pad out the gameplay for testing. And then there's the bigger picture. They're treating artisanship like it's foundational, like it's actually going to matter in Vera. Using surveying tools to sniff out rare spawns is the kind of depth I signed up for when I first got hyped for Ashes. It's almost like they cracked open a dusty old book on how to make gathering matter and said, let's do that. I've been testing this stuff in Alpha 2 with my guild, and I'll admit, when I'm out there hunting for resources, I feel like a kid on a treasure hunt, minus the inevitable disappointment of finding candy wrappers instead of gold. So yeah, props to Intrepid for getting this part right. But just because they nailed the foundation doesn't mean they didn't build a shaky house on top of it. Now let's get to the part where things start smelling like a dead skunk in a sauna, because as much as I'm digging the dynamic spawns, Intrepid's decided to spice things up with a splash of PvP, whether we asked for it or not. Steven's update talks about contesting resources and friction in sought-after areas, which sounds all fancy until you realize it means turning every rare mining spot into a potential war zone. You find a shiny cluster of legendary ore after an hour of surveying, and instead of peacefully cracking it open after all of your work, you've got a group of PvP gremlins rolling up to contest it. Like I'm in a PvP tournament instead of gathering herbs as a relaxing activity after a long day at work. It's not just annoying, it feels bait and switchy for anyone who thought gathering might be a chill corner of the game while structured PvP happens elsewhere. Then here's the kicker. This flies right in the face of something I'm pretty sure Steven said before. Back when players were getting stunned out of harvesting, like by raptors and stuff, he mentioned that non-flagged players wouldn't have to deal with being stunned by flagged players, or combatants and non-combatants. I thought, great, they get it. They let the PvE crowd gather in peace. But now, This update's basically, or this future update is basically saying, yeah, we fixed gathering, but good luck keeping your spot when every tryhard in Vera knows where the stuff spawns. Don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. I know that we've been dealing with this so far. I know that Ash is a PvX game, and risk versus reward is their whole jam. But there's a difference between saying you're a PvX game and just shoving PvP down your throat in every single aspect of the game. Particularly, in my case, when all we wanted to do was mine some copper and vibe. And if they think that this won't tick off half of the player base, they might be in for a rude awakening. Now let's take a step back and talk about why this PvP push feels like Steven just dumped a bag full of fireworks in my cozy campfire. Gathering in MMOs like WoW or Final Fantasy XIV, or survival games like Soul Mask or Valheim have always been chill zone games or activities. The place some players go to unwind after work or real life. You go, you grab your pickaxe, to put on a podcast, and just chill, just vibe while you mine some ore or pick some fancy flowers. It's meditative, it's low stakes, and it's a break from the chaos of raid wipes or PvP gank fests. For a lot of us, it's the part of the game where you don't have to sweat bullets. You're just there to enjoy the world that you're in, maybe craft something cool later, and that's exactly why so many casual players, myself included, got hyped for Ash's artisan systems in the first place. We saw a chance to get lost in the grind. Not in a fight unless it was absolutely necessary, like to defend the city or something. At the time, we understood that this was a PvX game after all. But now Intrepid's acting like Gathering needs to be the Thunderdome of the artisan gameplay loop, and it's hitting me and my fellow gatherers like a sack of bricks. In Alpha 2, we've been treating Gathering like a relaxing outing. Me and my buddies zoning out in our own areas, cracking jokes over Discord, transferring mats to complete crafting recipes for gear and so on. It's not about the leaderboard glory or flexing on other players. Although one of our guys stayed up for 48 hours when they found a legendary Braidwood, and everyone got bit by the jealousy bug when he finally got 31 of the damn things. But in general, it's about having a space to take a breather in a game that's already got plenty of ways to stress you out. So when Steven says friction in sought-after areas, all I hear is say goodbye to your chill Gathering vibes. I'm not saying that there can't be any risk. Throw in some tough mobs or tricky terrain or the one rando who wants to come and cause trouble, sure. But forcing PvP into a space that's traditionally been a safe haven for casual players feels like a change away from a balanced PvX focus, pushing it more towards PvP chaos. Alright, so let's talk about what happens when you take a system that's supposed to be a cozy escape and turn it into a PvP meat grinder. Because I've got a bad feeling that this could send casual players running away faster than a butcher at a vegan convention. Right now in Alpha 2, most of the folks I'm seeing aren't the hardcore PvP sweatlords. Those guys are off playing something else, waiting for sieges or naval combat to drop in Alpha 2. The ones sticking around, aside from the few handful of PvP trolls, are people like me and my guild, messing around with the artisan systems, farming mats, trying to figure out crafting recipes while we sip our morning coffee. Gathering's been our happy place in a test phase that's already a bit rough around the edges. But if Intrepid keeps pushing this contesting resources nonsense, they're basically telling us to either gear up for a fight or get lost. And honestly, I'm not sure just how many players are going to choose to move on. I mean, I get it. Ashes is PvX, and I'm not asking for a Hello Kitty adventure hug box where nothing bad ever happens, but there's a difference between adding some spice and dumping a whole bottle of hot sauce on my sandwich. If Gathering turns into a constant PvP slog, casual players, the ones who just want to craft, trade, and vibe, are gonna bounce to other games faster than you can say no taxes. The players that are left will all say good riddance, but they might not realize that the if you don't like it, don't play it mindset will only hurt the population of Ashes, but that's a different video altogether. I'll probably stick it out a bit longer because I'm making videos like this. But if I'm not having fun playing the game, I've got a backlog of games whispering sweet nothings in my ear that I can play instead. A Nightingale update just dropped, and even though that one is very, very not popular, I absolutely love the living crap out of that game. And I'll be playing that mostly this weekend. But anyway, here's the point. How many other players are going to feel this exact same way? Because if enough casuals walk away, you're not just losing a few gatherers, you're losing the backbone of what keeps an MMO alive, especially one that thrives on a player-driven economy. And that's a gamble I'm not sure Intrepid can afford to make. On that point, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture. Because this isn't just about me and my guild grumbling over a ruined mining trip. It's about what happens to Ashes when casual players start packing their bags en masse. I know the hardcore PvP crowd's probably rolling their eyes, chanting if you don't like it, don't play it, like they're the only ones who matter in an MMO. But here's the thing. Casual players aren't just some disposable side dish. They're the meat and potatoes of any MMO population. They're the ones keeping the economy humming with crafting, filling up the nodes during off hours, and basically making sure there's a world worth fighting over in the first place. You don't get a thriving Vera with just a handful of PvP gods duking it out in empty fields. That's called a ghost town, and players don't sign up to play dead games. And history's got some ugly lessons on this front. Look at games like Warhammer Online or Shadowbane. MMOs that leaned hard into PvP and forgot the PvE crowd needs a reason to stick around too. Those games burned bright for a minute and then fizzled out because the player base shriveled up faster than a raisin in a desert. If Ashes keeps forcing PvP into every nook and cranny, like Gathering of all things, they're risking the same spiral. Casuals leave, servers get quieter, economies tank, and eventually, even the PvP diehards bounce because there's no one left to fight or trade with. It's a slow death, and we've all seen it before. Once again, I'm not saying ditch the PvX vision or get rid of PvP entirely. Dynamic spawns are great and risk versus reward can work, but there's got to be a balance. You can't just slap PvP on everything like it's hot sauce and expect everyone to eat it up. If Intrepid doesn't implement this system with casual players in mind, they might find themselves with a shiny new game and no one left to play it except the hardcore PvP crowd, exactly as it is in alpha right now. Oh wait, there are barely any hardcore PvPers on the server right now. How about that? So let's ask the big question. If Ashes keeps cramming PvP into every corner of the game like turning Gathering into a cage match with extra steps, can we even call it a PvX game anymore? I mean, PvX is supposed to mean balance, right? Both PvE and PvP. A little something for the PvE crowd and a little something for the PvP crowd. Everybody gets their slice of the Ashes pie. But if traditionally chill stuff, traditionally PvE stuff like Gathering gets turned into a PvP event just because Steven likes it, then that's not PvX. That's just PvP. It's like saying a salad is still healthy after you drown it in a gallon of ranch. Sure, there's a piece of lettuce in there somewhere, but good luck tasting it with all of that ranch in there. And let's not pretend that this hasn't been tried before. They tried that Apocalypse Battle Royale mode a few years back, and it didn't stick. Not because large-scale PvP battles aren't fun, but because players want what was promised, a PvX MMO. History is littered with MMOs that leaned too hard into PvP and ended up as cautionary tales. Games like Darkfall or Mortal Online. They sounded great on paper but couldn't keep a crowd because they forgot that most players don't want to fight over every little thing. Ashes was supposed to be different. A place where a player could mine in peace one day and siege a castle the next day. Not a game where I'm fighting for my life just to pick some flowers. Risk versus reward doesn't have to mean PvP everywhere. There's plenty of ways to add challenge without forcing me to fight other players. throw in some nasty critters, or make the terrain a pain in the ass to navigate. Hunting griffins is a very satisfying example, because the terrain makes it difficult. But if every system in Ashes is just an excuse to make me fight other players, then Ashes isn't a PvX game. It's PvP with a side of denial. And I'm not sure how long it'll last if half the player base feels like this isn't the game for them. So look, I'm hyped. I know I don't sound like it, but I'm hyped about the dynamic spawns and Intrepid finally treating Gathering like the foundational system that it is. It's the kind of depth I've been dreaming of since I first threw my hat into the Ashes ring. But this contesting resources push, turning my chill mining trips into forced or coerced PvP, has me worried. Not just for my own enjoyment, but for all of the casual players who signed up for a world to build, not just a world to burn down. If Gathering stops being a refuge and starts being a gauntlet, I'm not sure how many of us will stick around to keep Farah's player-driven economy going. And that's a loss for everyone, PvP hotshots included. In the end, it all comes down to implementation and how Intrepid decides to introduce sweaty conflict into Care Bear Gathering time. That's all I have for you today. You're welcome.